Hello, everyone. I hope all is well today. 4.1 hit Wave 1 PTU just recently, and we got tons of new info from this, as well as some really cool leaks that I think you're going to want to know about. Last thing I have to say before we get started is if you'd like the content, feel free to subscribe. I have a Discord available if you'd like to join our community, as well as channel memberships if you want to go that extra mile. Regardless, thank you so much for being here, and let's talk about some 4.1. Now, first things first, I have to let you know that there are some spoilers ahead. Yes, lots of this info is already out in there in the wild, but if you want to learn about everything in game, I would recommend clicking off this video. With that out of the way, though, let's address one of the biggest changes out of the 4.1, and that is the Tier 0 item recovery. Now, this first implementation, as we all know, allows players to die and keep everything they had equipped to their person on them after they die. And whilst I certainly have my own opinions on this, this is tier 0 and has a long ways to go before it represents the final system. I do think this system will need some adjusting towards tier 1 and 2, and it absolutely has some issues right now in the PTU. I will say something that I never saw in the patch notes, nor did I actually see in the item recovery statement as by itself, was that you had to pay a fee of 210,000 AUEC to respawn. Now, I'm absolutely positive this is some sort of glitch of some sort, or they just didn't intend to add this for every single time you die. But it's very clearly stated in the text screen after you die that you will be paying this amount, including like the tax is built into the cost for dying. So definitely a weird thing that they didn't talk about much. I think they'll need to address this pretty soon. But either way, what are your thoughts on this death tax or whatever you want to call it? And what are your thoughts on the tier 0 item recovery? Moving on from that, though, we have the new Hathor facilities that you can find hovering above and on the surface of some of the Stanton moons. There are two sets of these on Daymar as well as Aberdeen. These sets involve three ground facilities and one orbital laser. Now, I'll say this really quickly is these facilities are super awesome. By itself, if you're not doing the sandbox activity that involves these facilities, you're still going to get some awesome gameplay out of these locations. Not only are they in really cool spots with Aberdeen having the new volumetric clouds, it looks really incredible, but you have a ton of PvE contact to engage with. The Nine Tails are pretty tough, and there's a pretty large amount of them. They're still a little glitchy right now, so I'll give it to them. They've been acting a little funny in the PTU, but they offer a ton of PvE combat as well as a ton of loot to find. So if you just wanted to go to these locations just to, kind of hang out there, you can find a ton of loot outside of the sandbox activity, and I think that's really neat. It makes it where that these locations aren't just going to be used for what this sandbox activity has involved with it, and you can just go here at any time of the day and, get some really solid gameplay out of it. Now, when it comes to the sandbox activity by itself, again, I unfortunately did not really get to complete this by myself, or at least the full thing. So I'm actually going to go ahead and leave it to another content creator or just someone to guide you through this a little bit more. Just to give you a super small breakdown, I will say is that it involves a series of tasks with key cards, some of the comp boards that you typically find in like contested zones, as well as batteries to bring up to the space station. It's a pretty unique set of tasks, but you do have to do the same set at each ground facility, which will then inevitably get you the ability to activate the laser. Again, that is a very, very small and general breakdown of what you have to do. I don't know the specific details because I didn't get to experience them myself. But I will say is that if you want to find that, I'm sure that another content creator will get that posted pretty soon. Regardless, though, once the laser activates, as you can see on screen, it is an awesome sight. It is something you just don't see in Star Citizen. So, as you can see with all the ships lining up around it, it was a really, really awesome thing to see. Now, of course, when the laser stops activating, you get to see the hole it makes in the ground. Once you go on that hole, you are entered into a cave. Now, this cave was filled with minables, and that is it, actually. Now, when it comes to what the minables actually were, I unfortunately did not have a mining tool on me, so I couldn't tell you what the names of them were. But I think it's pretty safe to assume that they are probably high in value. And I actually think they associate with some of the leaks we got earlier this week that involve the Banu mission collector. We're going to talk about that in just a second. When it comes to what we have in the PT right now, though, I do think that this is a really solid sandbox activity. I know that some people are disappointed about, not seeing anything about the Valacar quite yet, but I wanna urge you to, not jump the gun quite yet. We're still only in Wave 1 PTU, and they still have plenty of time to implement things that are needed for this patch. As a matter of fact, things like the Volt weapons and a ton of the different missions aren't in yet, and that clearly shows that hey, they still have a ways to go. If they have any Valakar implementation that they intend to have for 4.1, there's a chance that it's going to just take a little bit longer so they can get that as polished up as humanly possible. Now, of course, that is more speculation. They have teased the Valkyr in 4.1 by itself, and there's some leaks to say that it will come into the game. But I'm giving you the facts as it is now is that for the end of the sandbox activity, at least for the one on Aberdeen that we did, there was no Valakar, just minables. Now, before we move on to things like the Banu Mission Collector and the tons of leaks that we have that involve the collector, I want to talk about some other things that 4.1 has to offer as well. First things first, we now have some more ships that are purchasable in game. This includes the Argo CSV SM, the RSI Lynx, the Mirai Pulse LX, the Crusader Intrepid, and the Terrapin Medic. It is really awesome to see these in game now, but I think it is worth noting that there is one ship missing here, that being the Polaris. Now, I actually have some, cool things to show from the links that we have that involve ways to obtain the Polaris, but we'll get there in just a minute. Now, some of the smaller ship changes that we do have include the Gladius having functional control surface animations. Now, these are just like the ones we saw at CitizenCon 2023, where the flaps and stuff are moving, but unfortunately, they do not do anything at the moment. For fun, I tested it out. I turned off everything I could possibly on my ship, except for just like the ship itself, and I tried to fly or glide with the control surfaces. It's not in game at all. I promise you, if you try to do it, you're gonna fall straight out of the sky like I did. Unfortunately, it's not in, and I don't expect it to be anytime soon. But it is a little bit of a neat addition. It kind of feels like a tease, but it's really cool to see it in game. Now, when it comes to Drake ships, the first thing is that the Caterpillar doors work as intended now. I know you guys might have seen this around. It's some really cool news, and I think it's really exciting to have this ship actually function a little bit closer to what it's actually supposed to do in game. Of course, there's a little bit of glitchiness right now in this video. It kind of just like automatically goes back up, but I'm sure for the 4.1 live release, it'll be working as intended. The next thing involves the Drake Corsair. I'm not a big Drake Corsair fan, so I don't really care too much about what goes on with that ship. But apparently for 4.1, it'll have all of its weapons back. I didn't actually realize that they ever took away weapons from the Drake Corsair. I know that it got nerfed, but maybe that was it. They just took away weapons. Regardless, though, it seems that the weapons are back on the Drake Corsair. So if that is good news for you, I'm very happy to hear that. Now, one big change that I actually haven't been able to test yet is the new FPS mining updates. There's now a completely different set of minables for FPS mining, as well as updates to the Grey Cat Rock. This vehicle now has some mining heads. I think it's new, four new size zero mining heads, and detachable and purchasable storages. I think these are really nice updates. I know there's probably a lot more to it when it comes to the new minables, and there's associated with some of the new missions as well. But by itself, I think it's really solid that they're kind of differentiating FPS mining from like larger vehicle mining. Now, for the rest of this video, we're going to be talking about things that involve leaks, as well as just greater information about things like the Band Emission Collector and things you'll be seeing in the new 4.1 patch. Now, the first thing is you can actually earn ships, armors, and unique weapons from doing missions for Willico, the Banu mission giver. Some really cool examples seems to be things like the Copion Skull Gun, Copion Tooth Gun, a military skull gun, and a military tooth gun. Now, for armors, we have the armor with horn and string, whatever that means, and a random armor. I guess that just means random armor. This is also separated from the fact that there is the redacted armor in the 4.1 release view. That is actually going to be a different armor set as far as I'm concerned, but then again, we aren't too sure yet. And then we also move on to some insane ship rewards. This starts with the low tier, that being the Spirit C1 military and Connie Taurus military. Then we go to the mid tier, that being the Guardian military and the Scorpius military. Then we get to the high tier, that being the F8C military and F8C stealth. And finally, we have the insane top tier, that being the RSI Polaris. Now, there's also been plenty of leaks on how you obtain these as well. They've actually changed a little bit since the last time we saw them. Initially, it talked about things with the Valakar, and now it's talking more about minables and like favors for Willico. So I'm gonna go ahead and say that we are not too sure how we'll get this in game yet, but again, I applaud CIG for adding actual rewards to the game that are not just money. I know this sounds like a little backhanded, but they're finally adding like game elements to their game that makes sense. And even though this game is going to be unfinished for a while, I think it's a really solid thing for players to work towards, and I'm certainly excited to get in game and try my best to get some of these unique rewards. Now, for other leaks, we know that there's a new ship in the files called the Anvil Asgard. We have no other news about that, so I'll leave it there. If you want to comment down below what you think that is, I would love to hear your thoughts. But final thing is for leaks really is just missions. We see some things about stopping a bombing run. We things like with the new Hathor facilities that aren't in the sandbox activity, so actual missions for those locations, as well as like new fauna missions that involve the Copion. That's pretty obvious why that is for the Banu mission giver needs a ton of Copion horns, so you're gonna need some way to collect them. Now, I can go on and on about every single detail regarding the leaks and just the things we have in 4.1 right now, but then again, I don't have all the information, and unfortunately, the patch is just not in the best state yet for me to be able to go explore and do all the things I want to do so far. Regardless, I would say cautionally optimistic about this patch. I think it's a really solid step in the right direction. It offers some really good content as well as just giving you things to work towards, and I think that is an absolutely positive thing for this game. Performance wise, it was pretty rough in the PTU, but it's the PTU, so there's not much to say there. When it'll come to live, not too sure, but we should all have our hands on it by the end of the week when it comes to PTU. That about wraps it up for this update on 4.1. Again, I would love to hear your thoughts down below. Things like item recovery, the Hathor sandbox activity stuff, as well as all these leaks. There's a ton of information to digest, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on any of it in the comments down below. Besides that, though, thank you so much for being here. I know that this is a little bit more of a chaotic video. I wanted to get you guys some 4.1 news and some 4.1 gameplay. Of course, it's pretty early on in the P2, but I'm super excited for this patch, and I think it's something you should stay, again, cautiously optimistic for. Besides that, though, I should have an engineering video up in the next day or two about how it actually has our first survival mechanics in it. I'm pretty excited for that. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. But regardless, thank you so much for being here. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video.